Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. The mission. When I was a missionary in Chile some years ago, I lived in a small town in a little house with a few other sister missionaries. The house seemed like it had started small, like maybe one room small. And in maybe the 50s, perhaps, the 1950s, more had been added to it. And as the years went on, it just kind of grew larger. So then there was a hall and then a bathroom with plumbing and so on. The weird thing about this house was that around 3 a.m. every single night, the air itself would change. It was like the atmosphere inside the house changed. It felt like something was just terribly wrong, like there was just this feeling of dread in there. But I couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. The only way I've been able to verbalize it is that there was you felt like a spiritual nausea, like a kind of severe motion sickness, but it wasn't in the body. It was kind of more in the heart. It was more an emotional thing. Then we would hear children running, like children's footsteps and laughter in the hallway. None of us dared to leave our rooms in the wee hours of the morning because once you open the door to the hall, that strong feeling of nausea would kind of multiply tenfold. I would have probably chalked it up to just, stress and dreams. But everyone seemed to be experiencing the same things as I. We thought that it might be maybe our imaginations. So we decided that we weren't going to tell the next group of missionaries about, this. It was like a girl, that we felt there was a girl there or something, a ghost or something. But anyway, they ended up asking us about it because they obviously also felt this same feeling and they also apparently heard her laughter. And then there was other weird things that happened at night too. For example, one missionary felt this thin, kind of disembodied hand touching her back. I experienced sleep paralysis, which I'd never had before, and a tall figure with antlers that was kind of standing over my bed, staring at me. Children's toys would appear in the hallway, and there was just all this weird, weird stuff going on. Some of our neighbors told us that there was a nearby witch who didn't like us, apparently, and we occasionally found dead animals in the yard. Whether it was her doing or a carbon monoxide problem or an actual haunting, I'm still not really sure. But it was distracting us from sleep enough to make us useless during the day. We had house blessings done and prayers, and nothing seemed to get rid of this. Eventually, we were authorized to change apartments, and the events just stopped. I still don't think that whatever it was meant us any real harm, but I do think it was trying to be noticed or something. It was like it was trying to get our attention. So it was weird. And, we were all pretty glad to be out of there and to move somewhere else, to say the least. Well, it certainly does sound as if maybe this woman, witch or whatever they called her, was perhaps, targeting that place as some kind of, I don't know, doing some kind of magical spell thing that was sending some spirits that way, or perhaps, the actual place was just haunted. It would be interesting to know if, there were children there and they died, and, if there was any particular child that perhaps had some kind of trauma or something that after they died they would have wanted to hang around and haunt the place. I don't know. but it certainly sounds like either way there was definitely something supernatural going on. The red-eyed mass. From late 2003 to around the summer of 2005, my husband, who at that time was my boyfriend, and I lived in a haunted apartment in Chicago. When we first moved to this apartment, I often felt like I was being watched. And sometimes I had this, kind of strong sense of unease, like maybe I was in danger or something. But I was young, I was 23 when we first moved in, and a senior in college, so I blamed the feelings on stress and the layout of the apartment, which was a typical Chicago 4+1. We were on the second floor, right over the garage, and our living room window faced the living room window of another apartment. That apartment and mine almost always kept the blinds shut. So at the time, I did not actually believe in anything paranormal. I mean, to be honest, I never really thought about it much. I'm the sort of person that really, has to see something myself before I consider believing it. And once I do see it, then I usually analyze it endlessly until, I come up with some kind of solution in my mind. So on that particular night, I went to bed, and but as usual, I couldn't fall asleep quickly, which was, this was quite normal for me. Our two cats normally went to bed with me, but this time they didn't. And after a while, I sat up in bed and I looked out the bedroom doorway. Now, I can see the dining room area from bed, and if the cats were playing, they would inevitably end up in that area. Our apartment was very small, maybe 700 square feet, if that, and the dining area was kind of central to the apartment layout. I hoped I would see them so I could call them to me. It was dark, but not pitch dark, because the apartment's windows let in dim light from our neighbors across the way, as well as typical large city light pollution. So, thanks to this light, my eyes quickly adjusted to the gloom. That's when I realized there was a very dark black, the blackest black you can think of, blacker than black, if that's even possible. It was like velveteen tar, is the only way I can think of describing it. And it was this mass, it was just a mass of black. And it was just past where the apartment's very brief hallway ended and the dining area started. It was around 7 feet high and had a rough head and shoulders, torso shape, but the rest of it kind of faded off. Strangely, I wasn't alarmed at first. It was like maybe it wasn't registering that I was seeing this thing. If anything, I sort of leaned forward trying to get a better look because at first I really didn't know what this was. And then I absolutely couldn't believe my eyes. I was baffled for a moment. But when I leaned forward and I stared at this thing, it then seemed to turn and look at me. And when it did, I saw two red eyes in the thing that was like a head, where the head should have been or whatever. I did not see any other features, and I don't remember if the eyes were glowing or just plain red, but they were indeed red and I could see them clearly. When this thing looked at me, my fascination and amazement was quickly replaced by what I can only describe as a deep primordial fear. And then it swooped through the bedroom doorway and towards me. I did the only thing I could think of doing, and that was to duck under the covers like a kid hiding from the bogeyman. I have been in some scary situations in my life, but that particular fear was just beyond anything that I can possibly ever imagine and even describe. The feeling reminded me of the intense terror you feel when you realize the monster in your nightmare has spotted you. After several moments, I began to run out of air beneath the covers, so I decided to elbow my sleeping husband in the ribs hard enough to irritate him and make him wake up. Sit up, roll over, do something. It worked. And when he didn't react strangely, I figured the thing was gone. And it was. I, and later my husband, saw the shadow again, but it never appeared remotely as threatening, although I saw the spirit there 3 times. It took me years to come to terms with this experience. I mean, it's one thing to just write about this, or even talk about it, but to actually experience it, that's a whole another level. And there really is quite a trauma associated with it. The closest explanation I could come to was sleep paralysis. But other than the apparition looking similar to some of the hallucinations reported during sleep paralysis, there was no similarity to sleep paralysis. I had yet to fall asleep at that point and was able to move freely. I was perfectly aware of everything. The fact that my husband later saw a black mass during waking hours, and I saw something else when I was fully awake, also helped me come to the conclusion that what I experienced was not due to sleep paralysis. It was not hallucination. With the assistance of the Chicago History Museum Research Center, I did research on the property and building. The apartment building was built in the early 1970s. Before that, a Jewish academy was on that site. Sometime before that, in 1940, a house that was on site burnt down with no injuries or deaths. That house was once inhabited by a large family. One of their sons was a Marine who had died of disease while deployed overseas during World War I. There's no record of the exact address prior to that. I also sent a message to the property management company asking if anyone has ever reported anything related to a haunting or paranormal. I had a hunch that this spirit moved throughout the whole building, not just our apartment. And I fully expected them to say no, or to get no response from them. But to my surprise, the guy responded and said that he would check with the people in the office and get back to me. A couple of days later, he said, "Actually, I've been told that they were aware of the situation, but haven't had any reports of strange activity in a few years. I hope this helps." Wow. So, whatever it is, I don't know where it originates, what happened there to bring this thing, into this building. I have no idea. Well, sometimes these kind of red-eyed entity things, I mean, obviously they're not good. Anything with black, red eyes, that is not good. So either somebody died there a long time ago and, perhaps not a very good person, and this entity was somehow attached to them, and then once they died, it just stayed there even after they died. Or somebody was doing some kind of messing around with Ouija boards, or doing some kind of black magic in the building. It's kind of hard to say, but someone opened the door to this thing for it to come, or something happened there on that site or whatever that made it come out like that to the point where you can see it. The Jersey Devil. My grandparents used to have a vacation cabin in the Jersey Pine Barrens, and my parents would send me out every year. I used to live in Las Vegas at the time, and I would go there for summer vacations to visit. Last time I was there, I was about 8 years old, and this was in 1982. It was about 11 at night or so. Grandparents were in bed, and I was reading a comic book, and I had a flashlight, and I was reading it with a flashlight, and all of a sudden, I heard this god-awful scream coming from outside the cabin. That just scared the hell out of me because I had no idea what it was. I mean, I know what mountain lions sound like. I knew at the time then, and coyotes and all kinds of animals I knew. But this scream was definitely something that did not come from any one of those animals. It was like it was unnatural or something. Wasn't a fox or anything like that. So I turned the flashlight off, and it was just so quiet in the cabin. You could just hear a pin drop. It was so quiet, almost unearthly quiet. And then I heard this scream again. And this time it sounded like it was right outside my bedroom window. It was like it knew I was in there. It could feel me thinking about it or something. I'm, I was so scared. I almost peed myself. And by this point, I heard a sniffing and snuffling kind of sound coming from right outside the window, and something I can only describe as pebbles or small stones being tossed or rolled on the roof. There was no way I was going to look outside, so I just ran and woke up my grandpa. He saw the terror in my face, and he grabbed the light and he checked the perimeter of the cabin. He came back and he said he couldn't see or hear anything. So, anyway, needless to say, I slept in their bed that night. In the morning, we went outside and we checked under my window. And sure enough, you could make out hoof prints about the size of a large fist coming from the woods and right up to my window. I thought maybe it was a wild pig or something like that until I was playing on the other side of the house and I noticed a similar set of prints leading away from the house on almost an exact line from my bedroom window. I got home, I told Dad about what happened. He grew up around the Pine Barrens and what we saw, and he just kind of said, nonchalantly, "Oh, it must have been the Jersey Devil." I had no idea what the hell he was talking about at the time, but I never forgot that incident. And when I was a little older, I spent time in the library reading books and researching about the Jersey Devil, and it sure as hell sounded just like whatever it was that was outside my window. Or maybe it was a big pig. I'd like to think it was a pig and not some horse, goat, bat hybrid type of thing that was, a child of Satan or I don't know, something like that. But regardless, I never went back to Jersey to visit the grandparents or that cabin again. If they want to see me, they could come to me. Well, that Jersey Devil creature certainly did become quite popular after a while. I think at some point there were a lot of sightings in particular of it. I haven't researched it, so I don't actually remember how tall it was supposed to be, but certainly something that maybe about 6, 7 foot tall could probably have, hoof prints the size of a large fist, I guess. So, interesting. As for a pig, I don't know. It doesn't sound like it would have been a pig, but who knows? Whatever it was, it sounds like it was something scary. The creepy overgrown lots. I used to live in Montana, and I was about 14 at the time, and we lived on the outskirts of town, and I'd often go for long walks at night. It was something that I really enjoyed doing. There was this area, this one spot that was kind of my normal walking route that just always seemed off. Always gave me kind of a weird sort of negative feeling, like a kind of danger, red flag thing. But I didn't know why. Anyway, it was composed of 2 or 3 bare lots that were overgrown with brush, and right at the lots, the asphalt turned to gravel. And for whatever reason, that particular bit of graveled area there terrified me. It wasn't only me, though, interestingly enough. Everyone I talked to also hated walking past those lots, and they didn't know why. On the other side of the road from these lots was about 20 feet of land, and then there was a canal that was empty that time of year. I was walking one night and I had a flashlight since we didn't have street lights. As I approached the edge of the road and the beginning of those lots, my flashlight just started to flicker and it went out. I then heard this truck come barreling around the corner of the lots. They were curved and there were hills, so you couldn't see around them. This white pickup truck stopped on the gravel road right in front of me. Headlights pretty blinding. I didn't recognize the truck, so my first thought was that I was going to be kidnapped. I was scared. I could barely see the man inside, and I realized he wasn't even looking at me. I turned around to see three large wolf-like looking creatures moving from behind a tree. They were all hunched over, and they would extend one large clawed hand as if to feel their way before doing some kind of weird hop, dragging kind of movement forward. They all moved this exact same way, and they were moving directly to the canal, and then they disappeared into it. I looked back at the truck, and the guy hit the gas pedal, spinning out his tires on the gravel before bolting out of there. I was left in the dark for a minute, and then my flashlight came back on. It would have been quicker to walk past those lots to get home, but I turned and ran the other way. There was one area, a house before mine, that led back into these sheer rock faces. There was a cave back there that people would go to drink at. As I passed that area, I heard this rustling in the bushes, and I saw another one of those creatures cross the road there. As I got to my house, terrified, I just threw open the door. I didn't know if this thing was behind me. I had a feeling it probably was, but I wasn't sure because I didn't even want to look back. And then I heard something behind me, and it was growling very low. As quickly as I could, I ran inside, slammed the door, and I never, ever went on night walks around there again. Wow, what a terrifying experience. I can't imagine just being out there at night, pitch black, and then suddenly this truck shows up, and then these werewolf dogmen or whatever they are. I don't know. And then the feeling that you're being followed. Wow, that's really enough to scare you into a trauma or something. Well, I wonder what they were, but they certainly sound like some kind of werewolf creature or something. But what was the guy in the truck doing there? That's kind of mysterious. Was he dropping them off? Was he meeting them there? Was he one of them? That's really weird, isn't it? I would almost want to go back there just to see if I could find out. But on the other hand, probably not a good idea. Blood and other scary stuff. There are 3 times I can think of when I had, really scary paranormal experiences. When I was 3, around 3 anyway, I had 2 imaginary friends. Now, I don't remember their names anymore. It was such a long time ago. It was something simple, like Tommy or Timmy, both. These friends were both boys, both the same age, and they looked exactly the same. They both wore overalls and no shirt, and they were dirty looking. One carried a pitchfork, not like the devil or anything like that, but like an old hay pitchfork for farming. And one little boy carried a shovel. They were generally nice. Sometimes they would get angry, but it was never a big deal. Just like, kids, how kids behave. They showed up at the front of my bed every single morning. My parents pretty much ignored it. When I got older, we were talking about imaginary friends at my grandma's house, and I brought them up. My grandma went white. Apparently, the 2 little boys were my great-great-grandfather's twin boys from his first marriage. They were anemic, and one day, when they were playing outside on the farm, they got caught up in the barbed wire fence. By the time anyone found them, it was too late. They had died. So the second time, when I had a strange experience was when I was 4. I was asleep and my parents were watching a scary movie, and they heard something thumping against the house. But they thought it might just be the wind or just something normal. Anyway, they went to sleep, and I got up the next morning and I went outside to play before they did. Everything was covered in red blood. It was smeared on my swing set, smeared up onto the house, like a good 20 to 25 feet up. It was smeared around the pool, and it was all over the grass. The only thing that was clean was the inside of my pool. It was crystal clear, not even a drop of blood in it. I ran into the house to tell my mom that something was wrong, and she saw me covered in blood and freaked out. After she determined that I wasn't the one bleeding, she ran outside, looked around, and screamed for my father. Now, we never ever figured out what it was, where it came from. There were no dead animals, no buckets, seemingly no source, no paint. And there was no possible way for a person to have gotten up on the house like that and smeared the blood up there. Anyway, we never did solve that mystery. But all I can say is that it was terrifying. So the other experience was actually quite soon after this incident with the blood around the house. Well, anyway, growing up, my dad never really loved me when I was little. And my mom, she worked 3 jobs to pay for, make ends meet and pay for everything. He would sleep in every day and he wouldn't even bother feeding me. So I had to learn to get up and cook for myself and all that. So I had a routine. I would get out of bed, look down the hall to make sure that my father was asleep, go make food, and watch TV until my mom got back. Well, one day I got up, nothing was off, it was just a normal morning, until I stuck my head around the corner to see if my father was still asleep. He was. That wasn't the problem, though. The problem was that standing right beside him over his sleeping form, just kind of looming over him, was this massive, and I mean massive, dark red, humanoid figure right there. I don't know, this just kind of hit me. I don't know if I was too terrified to do anything or just foolishly brave, but anyway, I took a stance in the middle of the hall facing it, and I screamed at it to get away from my dad. It turned its head towards me, and it didn't have a face. There were just 2 circles, one slightly smaller than the other. The small one was in what was supposed to be the T-zone, and the larger one was where the mouth would be, but there were no holes. It kind of just growled like a dog, but it was very, very loud. I felt it go right through my whole body and my bones. It wasn't like anything natural. So I just tore out of there and I hid under my bed. After a little while, I figured it was probably going to find me and it would probably check under the bed first. So I checked if the coast was clear and I ran into the living room and hid there by the front door until my mom came home. I still don't know what that thing was, and I never saw it again. And, I don't know where to begin finding out about it. But quite frankly, it was the most terrifying moment of my life, even more than the blood, seeing that blood around the house outside. Wow, pretty dramatic, and certainly has all the hallmark manifestations of something very sinister, probably demonic. Um, so anyway, goodness, I don't know if you moved out of that house eventually or what happened, and if it's still standing and somebody's living there. I wonder what their experience is there now. But it definitely sounds like something pretty sinister was in there, messing with you all.